Okay, everybody, we are here for another episode with the Martin Eiden team on Ask the Expert. Very exciting. I myself am having this live outside of Chelsea Market. I had lunch at Creamline. Very exciting. And in honor of our 20th episode, I have Anthony Davenport, President and CEO of Regal Credit Management. Anthony has also been a good friend of mine for probably about 10 years. Would you say, Anthony?
Yeah.
So what's so great about this is that, all of this craziness going on, Anthony is going to walk us through in terms of like credit. What does a credit score mean? I'm sure most of us know kind of you want to have good credit to buy stuff, quote unquote. But with everything going on, what happens if you get bad credit? What happens if you miss some bills and all of that type of stuff? And Anthony, how long have you've been doing this for a real long time, right? Helping people manage the credit?
Yeah, so I started off in the financial space as a banker.
Okay.
But now I'm atoning for my sins. So I now help consumers. And I just started off because when I was doing loans for people, I would find that even the most well-educated people who made a lot of money had absolutely no idea what their credit looked like or what it was. They would just wait for me to pull it and then say, is it good or bad? And, wait for their rate. So I started learning as much as I could about the credit world while doing mortgages. But eventually I realized, hey, wait a minute, there's a business here because nobody knows
Wow.
anything about this. Let me just nerd dive in as much as I can to learn as much as I can. And, now we've been in business for just over 10 years and we operate
Amazing.
in New York, LA, and we're expanding to London in the next year.
Incredible, Anthony. True entrepreneur, which is one of my favorite types of people of all time. So Anthony, kind of in a broad spectrum, why do people need good credit and what is good credit about? Kind of a baseline question with that.
Yeah, so what's crazy is people don't realize how much credit is really used in their lives until they need it, until they get something denied. But it was originally designed to assess risk, like whether you could be money and pay it back, but now it's being used really as a tool to just make money off of you. So they don't want you to know much about it. That's why you never learned about it in school. Your parents probably couldn't teach you much about it because it wasn't used the same way when they were coming up. But it's being used for obviously to determine mortgage rates, and it's also used to determine your credit card rates. And it's also used now to determine your home and auto insurance rates, as though your low credit score somehow makes you a bad driver, or your house is more likely to burn down. But, it's really just a tool to make as much money of you as humanly possible.
Wow. So they basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm kind of paraphrasing. They're kind of using a credit score as your quick snapshot financial profile. Are you a good financially responsible person or not? Is that?
Well, that's what they tell you, but
Got it.
I'm telling you that they are literally using this to just shake you upside down. And I'll give you a quick example. You're in the real estate space, so this very much impacts you and your clients. But if you have a 705 FICO score, which is the golden standard, the FICO score, and you have an 800 FICO score, who do you think is more likely to default on a mortgage, the 705 or the 800?
I would say the 705 because it's lower.
Everybody would. And in fact, the banks are telling you that it's a higher risk. So they'll charge you up to a half of a point extra for a 30-year loan for that 705 score. But studies find that they're both going to pay their bills. Basically, if you have a score above a 700, 99.8% of the time, you're going to pay your bills on time. But they can charge you significantly more because they say, well, your score is lower.
Wow. That is great. That's incredible. And so kind of going on to the next point, right? And I just had a few cursory things where you actually helped me. What makes up a credit score? Do I need to have 10 credit cards? Do I need to have balances? Or when people inquire about my credit, does that affect my score? Kind of like, what are the quick bullet points on that?
So the most important thing to understand is that you can assume what the biggest component of what makes up your FICO score is. It's your payment history, whether you pay your bills on time. But the surprising thing is that's only 35% of your FICO score.
Wow. So only a third of your score is, do you pay your bills on time?
Yeah.
Sorry, that was very exciting. I shook up my phone there.
So the other 65% is a lot. And in fact, that's the part that you can have more control over, because sometimes, like if you're going through a COVID situation, your business is impacted, you're going through a divorce, a business failure, whatever, you can control whether you pay your bills on time, but the other 65% is something you can control.
Okay, and what are those areas?
So the next biggest chunk, which is nearly as much, is what percentage of your credit card usage you're using. And this is where it gets funky, because it's
Okay.
per credit card. It's not overall you have $50,000 available in credit cards. It's going to look at each card. Like let's say you have a Macy's card and it has
Okay.
$500. If you're using $400 of it, that's a high percentage. And your credit score will plummet almost as much as if you missed a payment. Credit cards impact your credit score by 30%. So nearly the same.
Wow. That's incredible. And kind of quickly, what is the rule of that you should never use more than 50% of your available credit for a credit card if you need to carry a balance, or how does that work?
Yeah, really the rule of thumb is to keep it 10%, but I'm going to tell you a trick. If
Okay.
you have a charge card with American Express, which is a card that requires you to pay the balance in full each month, the balance never has any impact to your FICO score, ever. So I'd say if you have credit good enough, get one of those cards, put everything on it, pay it off each month. You don't have to worry about a utilization percentage, but otherwise, try to keep it below 10%.
Below 10%.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So 1/3 credit cards, 1/3 payment history. What does the other 1/3 consist of?
So 15% of it has to do with the length of history. They want to know that you've had relationships with people for a good long time, just like friendships. They want to know,
Okay.
hey, did you know Martin before he had gray hair and before you had gray hair? I did actually. So that means
Before
a lot.
he had no hair, you mean?
So they want to know that, hey, you've had a relationship with Bank of America for 10 years and they have nothing but good things to say about you. So that's 15%. 10% comes down to the variety of credit that you have. They want to see that you can handle a credit card, but a mortgage, maybe a student loan, a car loan, different types of lines of credit they want to see that you can handle. The final
Got
10%
it.
comes down to what you mentioned earlier, which are inquiries. So they don't like to see a whole lot of inquiries for particular time periods. So for example, if you are applying for like 4 credit cards in a month, that can negatively impact you, but only as much as 10%. They make
Okay.
exceptions to that, which are key for your industry. If you're applying for a rental property, you can apply for an unlimited number of apartments within a 45-day time period, and they lump all of those inquiries into one.
Ah,
And
that's a good tip.
one inquiry will typically impact your FICO score by 0 points, 0 to 3 points. It's not a lot.
Okay.
It's the same thing when you're applying for a mortgage. Apply for an unlimited number of banks. You can go to every bank in town within a 45-day time period. 0 inquiries, or 1 inquiry is all they get lumped together with. Student loans and car loans are the other 2 exceptions. So basically, if you're shopping for a home, don't worry about it. It's not going to impact you whatsoever.
Got it. Okay, that's great. And then quickly also, I mean, I remember when credit scores used to be what, 700 was the highest, or 7, now it's 850 or 750, or like what, can you kind of walk us through a little bit of score? Does anybody get a score of 10? out of 850? Like, what's the baseline?
I was going to get political for a second and say
Uh,
10, but I won't. So at any rate, the score ranges from 300 on the low end to 850 on the high end. 300 is so bad that they can't even pay in cash. They're like, you can't even come into the store. 850 is like God came down from the heavens and etched your credit score on a tablet. It's carried down a mountain and praised by all. Like, nobody has an 850 and nobody has a 300, no matter what they say. But what's considered good has really changed over time. So when when I started off in mortgages a million years ago, if you had above a 620 score, you were considered A paper. They gave you the best rate and you can get whatever program you wanted. Now a 620, they're going to slap you across the face and say, don't come into our bank ever again.
wow.
During the last recession, what's considered a decent score moved up to a 700. So if you get 700, that's okay. That's the bare minimum of what you need to get a jumbo mortgage, which in Manhattan means, a 200 square foot studio. But,
I think 500, if you're borrowing 586,000, I think is the number, something around there.
Right. So if you are looking for a jumbo mortgage and you have a 699 score, it doesn't matter how famous you are. It doesn't matter how many millions in the bank you have. They're going to say, nope, you got to have a 700. But what's considered the A plus golden standard right now is a 740. Okay. That's what you want to have, in 740 or higher.
Okay. So 740, and then basically anything over 740 is bragging rights?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's great. So that's a score. Now, how do people, what about all these free online credit checkout things, or what's the best way for you to check credit, or these credit cards offer you quote unquote, scores for $10 a month? What do you recommend for people to really see what their credit is?
That's a fantastic question, because a lot of people come to us and say, I can't access, or I can't tell the difference between all these different scores. When I go to one company, they give me one score. I go to another one, they give me another score. They never seem to kind of line up. Where could you get the most accurate credit report from? And this is a secret that I included in my book, but I'll tell it to your crew and your audience. There's a website you can go to get the exact same credit report that lending institutions use to determine whether you get a loan and at what rate. It is www.itdoesn'tfriggin'exist.com. That's with 2 G's and an apostrophe.
Right. I
mean, as I mentioned in the beginning, this whole thing is a game that you're meant to lose. They don't want you to have access to this. So, in fact, when I was writing the book, I wanted to include a sample of what a real proper credit report looks like that the banks, and then just walk someone through how to read it, because it doesn't look like the cute things you get. And the credit bureaus fought us, and they were like, we don't want this included. And I went to his attorney and said, can they stop this? And he said, no. So I said, put it in there.
So buy the book.
Well, no, actually.
Well, no, first of all, it's awesome you had the book. That's really, really great.
I'll tell you one of the tactics that I list out in the book on how to get the credit report. But you're not going to like me for this, because it's going to make your phone ring.
Okay.
So, bankers can pull these reports, obviously, right?
Yep.
They're not supposed to give you a copy of those reports, of the real report. But if you have a sharp, intelligent, well-connected real estate agent that you happen to know, often they can sweet talk the bankers into providing that report. So I've heard.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Anthony. Any call I'll take. I'll be happy to do that. So now let's talk about the exciting part, or I think is the most exciting part. And in full disclosure, during the Great Recession. I candidly could not pay my bills. I was behind in my mortgage up to 6 months. I stopped paying lines of credit. I just did not have the money. I was, younger, dumber, and possibly more full of fun at that time. But and Anthony helped me out with a course of action on how to get back to it. So so Anthony, when people come to you, what are the most common problems that people have, and how do you still call it credit repair, or how does that work?
Yeah, we call it credit repair, or for the fun people, I say we bring sexy credit back. That's what we do. But really, the key is we don't take on everybody as a client. We know what works and what is not likely to work. So the first step
Okay,
is we have to look at a real credit report. So we do have the ability to get a real credit report. We'll review that with someone and then tell them what we can do to help. And we could tell them what they can do on their own to help. And we
got
ask
it.
them what their goals are. Like if they say, hey, I want to buy a house in a year, we get down to the details. What's the purchase price? What's the loan amount? Okay, you're going to need to have a score of X. And do you have, are you there now? No. Well, this is what you need to do to get there. And this is how we can help. So that's the starting point, is to, reach out to us and contact a certified FICO professional, AKA credit nerd. And my team will tell you, what sort of things you need to do.
That's great, and I think it's a really important thing a point that you brought up that I want to reiterate is that you just don't go to somebody like yourself and say, I want to buy a house next week, fix my credit. You need a period of time to make this get fixed. Is that correct?
Yeah, and depending upon the extent of it, we may say, hey, this could go on for 6 to 12 months because you have a whole lot of issues. If you haven't been paying your student loans and you need us to get you into a program that will get you back on track and remove the late payments, that takes 10 months by itself. So the average person's with us for about 3 to 6 months, but you
Okay.
don't know whether you're average or not. So I recommend reaching out before you need it, or before like, hey, I think I want to buy a house in the next year or two. Figure out what you need to get on track.
Great. I think that's really, really helpful. So what are the most common, I guess, credit issues that people come to you with?
Yeah, so surprisingly, the number one reason that people need credit repair is because of medical collections.
Interesting. I've heard of that, and I totally forgot about it until you mentioned it.
Yeah, so and the reason this happens is because people have health insurance and they go to
Uh-huh.
the doctor. Actually, I'll tell you my own personal story since we're getting personal here. There was a point in time when I was cycling into work from Brooklyn to Manhattan 4 times a week, and I was trying to win the war on being chubby, right? I've since failed that mission, but back then I was like, right? While going over the Manhattan Bridge, I hit something. I went flying over my handlebars. I had to go to the ER because I broke my arm, sprained my wrist, had a black,
Wow.
everything, right? Afterwards, I got so many bills because every person that you touch is a bill to your insurance company. The person who checks me in, that's a bill to my insurance company from one provider. Person who wiped me down, got everything cleared up, that's another bill. The person who actually saw me and then said, okay, tell us what the issues are, that's a third bill. Then they were like, you need an x-ray, that's a fourth bill. Person who reads me the x-ray is a fifth bill. Then they put me in a
Wow.
sling, they give me Advil, so on and so forth. So not all of those bills are paid by the insurance company. And they end up being collections on your credit report, and you never got a letter in the mail, you never got a phone call. They just said, screw it, we're just going to put this person in collections. So that is the biggest reason that people need us, is all of a sudden they say, hey, I'm ready to buy a house, but my credit score is 100 points lower than it should be. And I'll tell you, the single worst thing you can do when you find a collection like that is simply to pay it.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, it's like admitting guilt, and it lowers your score by 70 to 100 points on average.
Wow. That's incredible. So
Counter,
if you get those, go ahead.
it's very counterintuitive.
Very interesting. Very interesting. All right. So, because you just have a few minutes left. So, medical bills are number one. What else comes across your way, and how do you, or quickly, how do you fix that? Do you negotiate with the collection agencies a payment, or how does that work?
You call Regal Credit Management in New York or LA. Actually, I'll tell you that those things are tricky because there's so many laws that pertain to how this stuff is supposed to be reporting. So for example,
Ah,
you have to know the Fair Credit Reporting Act. You have to know HIPAA laws because they're not supposed to disclose insurance or health related information. And we can find a way that they'll violate one of those and then you could totally get it knocked off.
got it. Got it. And what about mistakes? Do mistakes show up a lot?
Oh yeah, 20% of credit reports have mistakes on them. Uh,
Okay.
and it could be something small like a misspelling of your name, it could be a digit off from your social, could be your address, or it could be, we've seen judgments and tax liens that had to deal with people that lived in the same building, but not directly to this person.
Interesting. Very interesting. So if these things show up, the best thing is to go to somebody like you to help you work it out, because to try to navigate it, and I know this is kind of a shameless plug for you and Legal Credit Solutions, but just to map through, writing to companies or calling people, uh, to me that just seemed like a big waste of time, and have somebody professional help you out. Is that kind of your take on it?
Well, I'm honestly biased, but I did include a chapter in my book on how to do the letter disputes if you really want to do it. But the first thing we emphasize is you got to go study the laws before you wield this, because writing a letter stating, "Hey, I think you got this wrong and that's not right," is not going to cut it. Or you may think you have a very good reason, but you could be admitting guilt as part of it, and then they're just going to say, "Well, you just admitted you didn't make the payment, so that's that."
Wow, that's yeah. So you need it's all the nuances on getting in that. Is there anything that you would like to say in closing, or any topics that I missed on this, Anthony?
Yeah, so one thing that has increased massively during this time period is that people accumulate late payments due to COVID.
Hmm.
And the companies are not hearing any sort of excuses. They don't care. What works best is if you reach out to them before you go late. So reach out to them before the issues are going to happen and say, "Hey, I expect some issues to happen. What can we work out?" Because afterwards, we're having a lot of difficulty getting it removed by just saying, "Hey, it was due to COVID." Like we have to dig into like, okay, can you prove that you followed the Fair Credit Reporting Act, Section 206 right here, da 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 da, like that. So reach out to them beforehand.
Wow, that's really great advice. So if you know you're going to be late, call them ahead of time and try to figure something out. Well, that's great, Anthony. Thank you so much for your valuable time today. Again, Anthony Davenport, uh, President and CEO and founder of Regal Credit Solutions. Stay on, Anthony, if you have a minute afterwards.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks again, everybody. And then next week we have Whit Prouty for Ask the Expert. He's going to be our monthly uh, guest host, if you will. All right. Thanks again, guys. Take care.